plate. The idea of this workshop is to put together the environmental crisis or challenges we might be facing on our planet with what you can do at home to help you be more resourceful, more resilient, and also help the planet in the meantime. So it balances a bit of sad things with good things, and I hope that the message you'll take home tonight will be about hope more than anything else. So how we'll do this? First, I will start talking a bit about the environmental challenges that we're facing on the planet and go a bit deeper on climate change. And then we'll talk on how to be resilient and resourceful from seed to plate, so starting with your garden, with soil, etc., and pursuing with your food and how to avoid food waste and all that. So what's the problem? So before we start, I just want to mention that talking about climate change or environmental crisis and all that can be pretty overwhelming to people, and especially for young people, because our human brains were never really wired to tackle such big issues. So you will have reaction to it, as many reactions to it as you have humans. People will go in denial, people will go in anger, people will be overwhelmed, sad, etc. So I always like to remind that to myself and to others to remain compassionate and think, for the people and keep the communication going rather than being divisive or polarizing. So recent research is showing that our planet has several boundaries with associated tipping points. Those boundaries are biological or ecological system with which a tipping point can be reached, threatening life on Earth as we know it. A good example of a tipping point is the dieback of the Amazon forest. The Amazon rainforest is the lung of the Earth and one of the biggest carbon sinks we have on Earth. But it's being deforested, as you know. And scientists have shown that if we get to 20% of deforestation in the rainforest, a tipping point will be reached, making the rainforest a savanna and actually a source of carbon rather than being the lung of the Earth. So that's just an example of the boundary that we are faced with and that are being accentuated by human activities. Today I will focus on only one of them, which is climate change, which is one we haven't reached the tipping point for yet, but which is the one that is the most talked about at the moment. So climate change. Greenhouse effect is a natural occurring phenomenon that's happening on Earth, and it's actually making life possible on Earth. Without greenhouse effect, the planet would be 33 degrees cooler and life wouldn't be possible. What creates climate change is the additional greenhouse effect that is created by human activities, and in particular the burning of fossil fuels such as gas, coal, and oil. What's happening is that the release of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is trapping the energy and the heat received by the Earth in our atmosphere, and is creating the global warming we are seeing. So to demonstrate that, I will just show you this animation by the NASA, which has been which is showing the evolution of annual average temperature compared to their historical average. You will see that as we go in time, temperature in average are getting more and more away from their historical average, and that they are warming. In particular, the warming is accelerating in the past 30 years. So you see in particular that in the last 30 years, the warming is going more and more away from the historical average, and that this trend is accelerating. So locally, how climate change will affect us? Well, I often hear that we're very lucky here because we live in the Great Lake regions and they are climate haven. That is true, that we will fare much better than other regions, such as California, for instance, or Florida. With that said, the Great Lake region is a very fragile ecosystem, and climate change will have some impact from the land to the lake. We will see change in the climate, change in the weather, which will create problems with agriculture, which will create floods and other incidents. And we will also see change on the lake with wider lake effect, and also some bloom, some algae bloom and other invasive. So we have to be careful to protect our Great Lake and our biosphere. So in Wellington County, this climate change will affect us with an increase in temperature. It will also increase the number of days above 30 degrees Celsius, increase average annual precipitation, make more storm, create less snow, and increase ice. And we have seen that this winter with a number of ice storms. If you want to learn more, I've got the Wellington County Climate Change Plan here, and I will take your email, so I will be able to email you the resource sheet that you've got. There's a number of links in there that you can follow to get more information on everything. So I just want to touch on that very quick, and just mention that the Green Belt is probably our biggest defense against climate change in Ontario. We are lucky to have the largest green belt in the world, with a lot of wetlands, grasslands and forests, and some of the best agricultural land in Ontario. The green belt provides amazing amount of services and revenue for the province. It is really our biggest defense against climate change, because it is helping us in many ways to protect ourselves from changing climate. It helps us regulate water flows and regulate flood. It's also filtering our air and our water. It's also carbon sink, meaning that it takes carbon from the atmosphere to store it. It has a ton of recreational value, and it is also a biodiversity haven with 78 protected species and oldest trees in Ontario that are about 800 years old, I believe. It's also one of the biggest resource in terms of food production in the province, with most of the fertile land there. And at the moment, we are currently losing 320 acres a day of farmland, so we should protect it all costs. So that was the depressing part. We are done with that. Sorry about that, but sometimes I have to put things in perspective. So is there any good thing that happens from that? Yeah, actually there are plenty good things that happen. Even if it seems overwhelming sometimes, we can all take action and it's never too late. There's also, with risk, there's also a lot of opportunities and a lot of solutions. And there are very exciting things happening. Also, you know, there will always be discrepancies and ambivalence, and we don't need to do everything right. We can't do everything right, but we'd rather need to have a lot of people doing things imperfectly than things perfectly, than one person doing things perfectly. So I'm sure you know already, but taking care of the planet's got a lot of benefits, helping you to save money by finding alternatives, by decreasing consumption, having a smarter usage, building resilience as well by being better prepared, be more resistant to shocks, for instance, improving health and well-being with less pollution, healthier product, healthier lifestyle, and of course protect the environment. It's also a great way to create community and to find like-minded people and build communities that are nurturing and supporting with each other. So, now let's talk solution. First one, in your garden, soil. Soil is one of the biggest climate solutions we have. I won't say much here because I have a video that we will watch just after that will sum it up better than I can do. But just to put things in perspective, 95% of our food comes from soil. And in a healthy soil, you have more organisms in a teaspoon of soil than you would have of people on Earth. It's a medium that is used for many things, from growing plants, from being a platform for human structures, etc. So I will play this video. I hope I can do it from. I have some books at the back as well. And one of them is by Geb Brown, and it's called From Dirt to Soil, and it's his journey basically trying to save his land from a very bare soil. So I think if you'd like to give a read to that, it's pretty interesting as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I continue after the video. So just coming back to 5 principles of soil health that are briefly discussed in the video. Minimize soil disturbance, so that we've seen in the video, to avoid compaction and avoid destroying soil aggregate. Then maximizing the biodiversity and rotation to increase nutrients intakes and all that. Keeping the soil covered at all times to protect it from, like erosion, abrasion from the wind, etc., etc. Maintaining living roots as much as possible, and if you can year-round, to be able to store carbon all the time, and continue adding organic matter to your soil, and finally integrating livestock, which is also a great source of nutrient and organic matter. So obviously we're not all farmers, as it was said in the video. So what can you do in your soil yourself? Well, there are a few things you can do. First thing is to avoid tillage and increase disturbance. So in the handout I gave you, you have a series of gardening methods that you can use that are no-till. And basically what they do is that they either use mulch, a lot of mulch on your soil. So for instance, you've got the roof stout method, which is basically mulching your garden with hay continuously and planting even in hay. Or you've got different kinds of method where you actually build your beds with various materials. So I have 3 examples on this table there, which is the lasagna method and the algal culture. So basically, lasagna method, what you do, you start with cardboard to create barrier for weeds and all that. And then you add layers of brown and green matters. So brown matters would be dead leaves, for instance, compost, things like that. And the green matter would be your grass clippings, etc. And then you finish with a series of soil on the top. Algal culture is similar, but in this case you would not alternate, but you would start with a big layer of wood at the bottom. And this wood would help you actually add organic matters to your bed and would progressively compost to provide nutrients to your soil. Algal culture is a very good way to build and to fill raised beds. So for instance, when you get those raised beds that are 2 feet deep, they're like, you don't believe, but when you need to fill one with soil, it's a disaster because it takes so much soil. So a good thing is to start this algal culture technique and fill them with you can use big piece of wood even, and that will help you a bunch to start your raised beds. So now I'm not a soil expert, but I wanted to do something fun for you to take home as well. So this is also in the handout. There's a few soil tests that you can do at home to see and check how healthy your soil is. The first one would be the squeeze test, which is basically taking a handful of soil, most soil, not too dry and not too wet, and give it a good squeeze and see how the soil reacts. So if it crumbles, or if it sticks to your hand, or if it's just a nice texture, and the details, the protocol is in detail in the handout. It will tell you if your soil is more sandy or loamy, or if it's more clay, and depending on that you'll be able to amend it. Second thing you can do is the worm count. So that's a simple test as well, and the idea is to count how many earthworms you have in your soil. As we saw in the video, earthworms are very important to transport organic matter through the soil. And so usually a healthy soil should have at least 10 worms per cubic square. So what you can do is you cut a cubic square of soil in your garden, you take that and put it on the top, and you count the little worms and see how many you get. So that again is also detailed in the handout. Percolation is another one, basically to see if you have drainage issues or not. So that you can do, and if the hole you fill with water takes more than 4 hours to drain, is that you likely have a drainage issue on your soil. And finally, you can do some pH tests. So I have a pH meter here, but you can also do it at home with some home products. So you can test whether your soil is alkaline or acidic. And you can do that with baking soda or with white vinegar. So it's really easy, and again, it's either and that. And finally, no, I think I got all of those covered. And so what you can do when you do your soil testing, you can do it in 2 different places. In places that are undisturbed, so that would be your fence line or places where you don't do anything. And then you can do that as well in your garden, so that you can see the difference between the soil that you manage and the soil that you leave alone all the time. Knowing that the soil in the undisturbed area will be your best possible condition on your soil. And then I had a little surprise for you, which is a fun test that you can take home to do, which is the soil your Andy test. And this one is about trying to see how healthy is your soil by burying some cotton undies into your soil. The idea is to leave them 60 days at least in the ground, and to see how decomposed they are. How it works is that cotton is a form of carbon, and microbes use it as their energy and as their food, basically. So the more microbes and living matter you have in your soil, and the more the undies will be decomposed. So I got the whole protocol also described. And I have some undies to hand out. And to prove that they were not used before, I'm opening the thing here. And I think we're not a lot, so I let everyone get 2 undies so that they can test their disturbed and undisturbed area. And I have the little flags as well to mark where you bury it. So the idea is to bury it like in 6-inch deeps. And I think the point of using undies beyond the pun is that you can, even if they are completely decomposed, you can still find the elastic there. So that's a good way to know where you actually buried your undies. So
how deep again does it have to be buried?
6 inches.
6 inches. So it's in the and out.
Up on your slide it looks like 6 feet. So
Oh yeah, that's me. That's because I'm French and sometimes I don't. Yeah. Sorry, it's 6 inches. I didn't correct that.
That's
Neighbors would be thinking you're burying the body that goes
Yeah.
6 inches is much more doable. That's
Yeah, the 6 inches is fine. And then I have some. I have some more information as well in the handout and on this stick. Cool. So beyond your soil, there's a number of things you can do as well in your garden to be more resourceful. So let's go through that. I'm not lazy. I'm taking care of the planet in my garden. Okay. So nature. I'm trusting nature and the process. Regeneration doesn't mean messiness, and what people can see as a very tidy yard is actually an ecological or biodiversity desert. So when you design your garden, that seems to be very straightforward, but work with the landscape and not against. Try to understand what is the history of your land and how it was used in the past and how you can make the most of it. Consider integrating trees and help yourself with the landscape for erosion control and all that. And also, don't hesitate to reach out to conservation authorities in the area. They sometimes have some workshop or some program to help you with your property. So don't hesitate to call them because they are experts and they will happily help you most of the time. Then, what to plant? Well, favor native plants. An estimate is that in a garden you should have about 70% of native plants, which is a lot, but which is a good ratio to sustain biodiversity. And it's also helpful to plant perennials that will progressively adapt to the weather and come back every year with less maintenance. Also, choose pollinator-friendly species. 85% of the flowers on Earth depends on pollinator, and in Ontario, 1 in 3 bites we eat depends on the pollinator, so they're extremely important. Bring diversity to increase the resilience of your garden, and that's exactly what we've seen before. And also try to use low maintenance species, and especially in your lawn, so that you don't have to overuse resource to maintain it, and give yourself more work than you need to. So here, that's an illustration I let you revisit at home after today, but it's basically a comparison between a good garden and a lawn, and the implication it has on the environment and on the ecosystem. So then other way to help you and in your vegetable as well, in your vegetable garden as well, is to let the plant do the work for you. So use companion planting, for instance, so that's plants helping plants to complement each other and help themselves thrive. So they can help themselves in different ways with pest control, pollination, nutrient exchange, growth supports, etc. So in the handout, and next slide as well, I have a small handout of basic companion planting guidelines, but you can search on the internet. There's a lot of resources, information as well. And then another thing you can try, it's more for small gardens because it takes a bit of work, but it's planting your vegetables in a square foot gardening pattern, which basically instead of planting rows, you will plant your veggies in a square foot. And what it will do is that it will be tighter and normally reduce the need for water, improve weed control, and also improve the yield. So again, I have this on the table here. You absolutely do not need this gadget to square foot garden, but it will tell you, it will show you where to put your plants in a square foot, and it gives you a guidance on how many per square foot for each plant. So obviously tomatoes are 1, but carrots you can start with 16 per square foot and then thin them to 9, etc. So that works pretty well, but it's a bit involved, so for bigger garden it's a bit more complicated. So here is the companion planting chart. I have the link in the handout for it, and that is an example of square foot garden plant guide. So tomato 1 per square foot, spinach 9 per square foot, and garlic 4, for instance. So moving on now to water, also a big resource to conserve. That seems as well quite obvious that conserving water is important. But just to put things in perspective, like having just one single rain barrel during the summer could save you $35 per month in water if you're on municipal water. So it's not nothing, knowing that a rain barrel costs $70 to $120. It's very, very easily amortized. And next, obviously, try to have a friendly garden is how I call it. Try to avoid using synthetic fertilizer and pesticide. Limit leaf blowing, mowing and tilling, and like let your garden do its thing, right? Leaving leaves in the fall will provide habitat to a lot of pollinators over winter, etc. And it's less work, so I love it. I love regenerative gardening. And then what you can do as well is leave areas of your yard or your garden completely untouched for pollinators and creating habitat for biodiversity. So then I won't say much on that. There's a lot in the handout as well. I have on the table a kit of things I have in my garden house kit. That are natural-ish products. So yeah, baking soda, white vinegar, Epsom salts, for instance, diatomaceous earth, I don't know how to say it, but
Diatomaceous.
yeah, a bunch of natural products that you can use in your garden rather than going to very strong chemicals. And then as well, that's something I don't do myself because I'm a bit grossed out by them. But using beneficial insects in the garden is more and more popular. And so, for instance, you can buy actually ladybugs or ladybug eggs to deal with the aphids in your garden. So, or you can buy as well the mantis, the one that kills the male, I don't remember the name. Yeah, or nematodes or things like that to help you actually treat your garden. And there's actually, I didn't put it in the handout, I'm just thinking about it now, but there's a Netflix documentary that's interesting about that, which is called Little Us Big Farm. And so it's a regenerative farm, and they explain how they go through the process of, they get this problem in their farm, and so they bring that kind of animal to help, and then that brings this problem, so they bring that kind of animal. And then the system balances itself and it's all work.
And they have a zoo.
Yeah, also yes. And finally, resilience in the garden. Growing your own food, selling seeds, learning foraging. I think the round seasons is done, but we're getting into dandelion season. So that's salad, jams, meats, etc. Try to buy local food from farmers and farm stands if you can, and join local groups and communities on gardening. We are pretty lucky in Erin with the 2 garden clubs we have that are excellent source of information and community. And then also take advantage of local programs for gardeners. So in Wellington County we have the Green Legacy, for instance, for the trees. And there's also programs by the conservation authorities. Okay. Now let's go on to food as a climate solution. Any question on the gardening part or soil before we move on? Actually, take some water. Go ahead. Cool. So, just to start with food, here's one of the biggest challenges we have with our food supply at the moment, is that it's global. So, in North America, in average, a meal travels 2,500 to 4,000 kilometers before reaching our plates. It's not unusual to see food grown in Western country, shipped to Asia or somewhere else to be transformed and shipped back to us to be sold, which obviously creates a lot of environmental impacts, but also social impact with working conditions, etc. So local and seasonal food is always the better choice when possible. Then one of the most infuriating problems, to me anyway, is food waste. 30%, a third of the food that we grow worldwide is wasted, and it's 40% in Canada. Food waste have tremendous impact on climate change and on environmental issues, obviously. And they create even more impactful emission with the creation of methane. So I will play a quick video. So localize your food supply if you can. We are very lucky in Wellington County and in Erin to have so many local food producers. We really have a big culture of food. So this is a map with some of the farms in Erin, but we have great resources to help you find local farmers and local food source. From Taste Reel and from our food feature, I have the local food maps and local food guide at the back for you to take if you want to. And with the price in the supermarket right now, it's not necessarily so much more expensive than it was before in comparison. Then look at what you eat. Consider seasonality. Having strawberries in the middle of January is super nice, but it comes at a very, very bad environmental cost. And it's also not tasting that good. Let's be real. So let's wait for Ontario strawberries in June, which are much better anyway. And then consider your diet. And I know we have a lot of great meat eater here, and I'm one of them. But consider maybe eating a bit less of meat, but better meat. We have a lot of grass-fed beef around here, and a lot of regenerative farmers that have introduced livestock into their rotation and into their regenerative farm systems. So let's give that a try, and maybe instead of eating twice beef during the week or 3 times beef during the week. Eat once the good grass-fed natural beef. Then work on food waste reduction. Here as well is a lot of common sense and a lot of easy things to do that you probably do already. But you will see in the handout I have a full list of what you can do. In 3 steps, it's pretty easy. Plan ahead. Think about what you need before you go to the grocery store or shopping. And also, never go to the grocery store hungry. We've all done that, where we buy everything we shouldn't be buying. So take a snack before getting in there and don't let them fool you with marketing. Then, of course, make sure that you eat first what you bought first, and etc. Keep it fresh. So there's different ways of doing that. First, by knowing how to store your food and making sure that you keep your veggies in the right part of the fridge, and etc. There's a way you can as well wrap your vegetables into some paper towels so that they stay at the right humidity. You can also freeze items before they go past their best date, for instance. So you can virtually freeze everything from bread to vegetables to meat, etc. Then use it up. So that's about being creative and learning different ways to use commonly wasted food. So there's some resource in there. I have a link in the handout on finding 5 different ways to eat common food. Then you can make sure that your wilted vegetables, you can use it either like that. I like to fry them, for instance, or you can try to revive them by putting them in an ice bath for 5 to 10 minutes. So vegetables, celeries, and then also you can use what doesn't seem too good to eat anymore, like fruits that are a bit bruised or all that. You can use to make compote or to use in juice or in smoothies, these kind of things. Also learn about best before date and expiry date. So I have some resource as well on that. But some products you can use way past their date. So canned food, for instance, you can use a year after the expiry date, for instance. And then try pickling and preserving. So that we will do some lessons on that later in the year to learn about that. And I think I forgot one of the tips as well for the keeping it fresh. What you can do in your fridge is taking a box in which you put all the food that will expire soon and put that at the front of your fridge. Like that, you don't have to dig out, oh, I thought I had some tomatoes left or what. You've got everything in this box or this basket, and you just have to take from there. Then beyond food waste, obviously we can do our best to limit food waste, but some we cannot avoid. And for that, the best way to deal with it is to compost. So composting will be helpful for your garden and will help you to limit the impact of your food waste. There's a lot of resource from the County of Wellington on composting. They sell biodigesters, for instance, and they have some information that can help you do that. We also have some good composters in the community, but I have to get their permission to give us more resources and maybe do a workshop at some point with them on that. Okay, and that's about the end. So, key takeaways for today is that the environmental challenges that we are facing can feel overwhelming and hard to really comprehend and hard how to feel about it as one person on the planet. But it's not too late to act, and we can all have an impact. There's a lot we can do, and there's a lot of hope to do things better. You can do as little or as much as you can. It's not about competition or be the perfect environmentalist. It's about doing what you can. And having a lot of people doing things imperfectly rather than one doing it perfectly. It's often by talking to your neighbors and starting little things that you will inspire them to do more, and etc. And you are not alone in this. There are resources to support you. I have the handout, so you have a paper version, but I will circulate the sign-up sheets for today. If your name is not on the list, please add your name and email address, because there's a lot of links in the handout, and so I would like to send you both the presentation and the handout so that you can click the links directly and it's easier. And then finally, overaction you can take, but that's totally outside of the scope of this project, is measuring your carbon footprint. I have some leaflet there to tell you how you can do that, or you can click on this link to get the handout, or you can learn more about climate change and stay informed. And also the best thing to do with all these things is to talk about it. So don't be shy, ask questions, and spread the word. So thank you so much for coming. And we can turn the light on.